Welcome to Recovery Corner, where the many pathways of recovery intersect. This is a space where you will hear personal stories of triumph in recovery, gain insights into various recovery-oriented systems, and learn how leaders across the country are building recovery-ready communities. Recovery Corner is brought to you by Young People in Recovery. YPR is a recovery support service organization that engages people in and seeking all pathways of recovery, as well as their allies. Recovery Corner podcast does not provide clinical advice. The following episode contains themes and discussions of substance use disorder, specific substances, suicide, sexual assault, and violence that may be distressing for some listeners. If you or someone you know is struggling with any of these experiences, you can find resources on our website at youngpeopleinrecovery.org/resources/. Please note that these resources are supplementary and are not meant to replace another recovery pathway or the help of a professional. Remember, recovery is possible and we are in your corner.
Hi, friends. Welcome to the Recovery Corner podcast produced by Young People in Recovery. In today's episode, it's exciting. We're launching our series called Recovery Stories, where we have authentic and vulnerable conversations with people about their experiences in recovery and on the healing journey. Our intention with this episode and this series is to provide inspiration and new ideas to help support you on your recovery journey. Our goal with that is to help you create some insights, maybe even some epiphanies about what it's like to be on a healing path, and maybe to provide some tools and ideas and support for you along the way. So I'm Brian Knuckles. I'm a staff member at YPR and a chapter lead in Pittsburgh. I'm also with Carly, who's my wonderful co-host. Say hello to the people, Carly.
Hello. Is this where I say something about myself?
Yeah, why don't you give us a little intro? That'd be nice.
Yeah, well, I'm Carly. I am the San Diego chapter lead, and I work with the national team at Young People in Recovery. Really excited to be working on this podcast and talking to awesome people like Matt, who I know from a partner site that I work with called Confidential Recovery. He's a counselor there, and a person in recovery. I don't know. I feel like I want to tell people kind of like how I met Matt, because it's kind of funny. I don't know. I was at the site just saying hello to new counselors and stuff, and I met Matt. And the program manager introduced us. And I remember being like, this guy looks like really familiar. And I couldn't place where I knew him from. I don't know, a couple days later or whenever, I realized that like, this is the guy that I know from that Instagram account who posts all these stories, because you post yourself on there sometimes. A Life Recovered. And then we talked about that later, but I guess we'll talk about A Life Recovered a little bit more. But how are you doing, Matt?
So I'm doing well. I'm glad I got to carve out some time here for everybody listening and you guys. I have a new baby at home, which is one of the gifts that we talk about from this program, getting to be there and be present for her and, take care of her now that I'm able to take care of myself. I'm doing well. I'm doing well. Working from home today, so got some time. Yeah.
Well, first of all, congrats on the exciting addition to your family. That's fun. So we're here now where, you're working from home and you're able to be present with your family. But maybe could we start with just a little bit about your story, whatever you want to say about that. So what's your recovery story, Matt?
So, it's like anybody's, it's a long one, but basically it starts out where, I'm originally from Connecticut. And I was adopted at a very young age, a couple weeks old. I was adopted from Fort Worth, Texas. My parents came and picked me up down there. For some reason, my mom just couldn't conceive. Women have difficulty sometimes, and they decided to adopt. And all of a sudden, then she had my brother and my sister. So I'm the only one adopted in my family. I am the oldest. I grew up with every opportunity to succeed. I had a wonderful childhood. It's funny, every time I went to treatment, and I'll get all into that, but every time I went to treatment and detox and all, they always try to pinpoint, well, what happened? Why are you like this now? What happened? Where's the trauma? Where's the childhood? And that was one of my most difficult things is I didn't really have that. I had every opportunity to succeed, like I said, and I had a good childhood. My parents are very successful. They're still married. They just hit 40 years of marriage. And so I grew up, playing sports and doing just living a very normal life, out in Connecticut. And, as I got into high school, I was always a guy that, at a young age, even in 5th grade, I was getting most humorous. And, I was always class clown and the guy who really wanted to put on a show for everybody. And I really liked to be liked by everybody. Like, I didn't want one person in the room to not like me. You know what I mean? That would upset me. But what that led to early in high school was me kind of being a little bit of a different, as you get older, those groups separate. They're separated by music, or they're separated by sports, or they're separated by interests, whatever. And I wanted to appeal to all those groups. So I could see, as 9th grade was approaching, I was kind of like a chameleon of sorts, appealing to different groups and kind of changing who I was to meet others' expectations. And I think that was kind of a catalyst, I think, for some of the things that happened to me later on. But, I had a very slow introduction into mind-altering substances and alcohol. I had my first sip of Coors Light probably at like 15 or 16. I smoked weed for the first time at like 16. I wasn't off to the races. It was just a little bit here and there, and that's cool. And it wasn't a dire search for it after I first had it, but then, I could see my grades were starting to slip later on in public high school. And my parents made a recommendation that, hey, we have the money to send you to a boarding school. And here's this great option. And I don't know how they enticed me to do it, but they did. And it was an all boys Episcopalian school, coat and tie every day.
Wow.
I don't know why. I think I was just so over my public school at that point. I had gotten like caught for cheating and stuff, and I was embarrassed. And I said, you know what, let me just go try this new thing. And I don't know why I said yes, but I did say yes. And I ended up going, and it was in upstate New York. And it was a blessing and a curse, because that was the first time that I had structure introduced into my life. There was chapel in the morning and classes. And then as soon as classes are done, you play sports. And then after that, you get cleaned up, do a little homework. And then there's dinner, there's specific meal times, and there's expectations and things that you have to do there. And it was a good school. It was where I first saw structure, and I did very well. I was co-captain of my varsity golf team. I was writing for the newspaper. I got like the ethics award for this class. I mean, I was doing really well. I was in they have a list of like where everybody's at, and it's all like the combined score is like athletics, grades, like all this stuff. And I was like 8th out of like 90 kids, you know what I mean? So I was doing really well. I through the structure, I was able to get on a higher level, which was awesome. But also with that came more drugs and alcohol, because we were a school that was a boarding school. We're there 24/7. I stayed there on most weekends, and you have day students that come and they drop off alcohol, or they bring whatever, and then they leave it for us to do on the weekends, or we buy it from them or whatever. So that's where I was first introduced to most of the hard drugs, cocaine, ketamine. We had guys from like all over the area, and we had one guy who had a horse farm. And so he had ketamine that he would boil down and bring the powder in. And so we'd all be like walking around high as hell, throughout the dorm on the weekends, and just like really crazy, like bizarre shit, and, that's kind of where, I got introduced to pharmaceuticals there, and oxys and benzos and all that stuff. And, I started to really enjoy that stuff. I was really good student during the week, but I really went hard on the weekends. And I didn't even want to go home to Connecticut, because I knew that this was waiting for me on the weekends, and I could get high here, And so I graduated there, and I left there, and I went to the University of Rhode Island. So I did a couple years at that school. And I did well. I was able to get into a decent college, and because that's what you do in my area. Every parent talks about, hey, where's your kid going to school? Where's your kid going to school? And like I was on the less impressive end, which whatever. But I was doing it, and I went to college, and all of a sudden I went to college, and I lost all that structure. So I went to college, and I just I was doing cocaine every day. I'm not going to get into it all or war stories, but it was just chaos. There was absolutely no productivity. Nothing good came out of it. I'm surprised I even made it into my sophomore year. By the sophomore year, by May, I had stopped going to classes. I had straight Fs throughout. And they basically sent me a letter and said, hey, you're not invited back, dude. Like, peace, Yeah. And I looked at the letter and I was like, that's fair. I haven't done anything. And my parents were pissed, of course, because they had funded 2 years for nothing. And so I got back there, and once I got back home, I was into other stuff again. And it started this cycle of just starting things and not finishing them. And I was okay with that. I just wanted to do what they think I should do, or what's the next best thing for Matt, or what will get me through the next month, and, eventually, I was doing so much cocaine over there that I did have an intervention. I had an intervention in 2010 after a concert at Webster Theater in Hartford, Connecticut. I had come back, and the next morning I had an intervention. It was just like you see on TV. It was a whole room of people, my friends, my parents, family, all in this room. And what I was aggravated about, though, was some of my friends I had done cocaine with like a few nights before. I'm like, why are you sitting on the couch right now, dude? So I wasn't there to like look at myself. I was there to be like, what about him? He, you know what I mean? I still regarded it as a phase. I was playing blame game, and they all said, we're so worried about you. I mean, looking back, yes, I went harder than anybody. You know what I mean? When it was like 12 or 1 or 2 o'clock, I was like looking for, AM. I was looking for the next thing to go to. I didn't want the party to end. I liked uppers. I like going for days at a time. I don't want to sit in the couch and melt away. I want to go. What's next? And it caught up with me. And my parents basically said, here's 2 choices. You can get the fuck out of our house, or you can join the military, because you did well with structure, remember? So you can go do that. And so I said, okay, well, that's not a lot of options. I don't really have anything to do. I don't have any money. I'm like working at a fucking deli part-time, like barely getting by just to buy IPAs. Like it was shot. So I said, okay, I'll join the military. So I joined the military, and, I've always been a guy that likes, when others run away from the fire, I run towards it. I like the intense stuff. So I said, well, if I'm going to do the military, I better join the special operations program. So I worked to get a contract for special operations for about a year. So I worked out with the special warfare New England guys, and I ended up getting a Navy diver contract. And so I got a contract to go into boot camp as a Navy diver in Spec Op boot camp, March of 2011. So March of 2011, I left for boot camp, and I was using up until that. But obviously I was done after that. And it still wasn't an everyday thing at that point. It was more just, when I did it, I went really hard, and I knew I had to stop, and I went to boot camp, and, they ask you that you do this whole, and I'm way out of the military now, so I can talk about it, but you do this whole intake, and have you ever done this? Have you ever done that? No, absolutely not. No, nope. Never smoked weed. Nope. So you get in, and of course, I tested clean. So, okay, he's never done that. It's great. Awesome. Shiny guy, So anyway, so I got in. My boot camp was, made up of SEAL, SWIC, EOD, Air Rescue, and Navy diver. So SEALs, Navy SEALs, obviously. SWIC are special warfare combatant craft crewmen. Those are the guys that pick up and drop off SEALs on their missions. Air Rescue are the guys from the helicopters that are grabbing people out of the water. EOD is like the hurt locker, explosive ordnance guys, and then divers, us. So there was the 5 jobs. So it was hard. I mean, it was the hardest thing I had ever done up until I got sober. But it was hard. It was 9 weeks of hell. But it was awesome. I got out of there. We started with like 95 guys. We left with like 62. So we had dropped quite a few along the way. And I got out of there, and I went to follow-on training. And of course, I wanted to party. I went out, and they told me at the training command, The only thing you have to do is not drink. You can't drink during these next 8 weeks. We had a couple different trainings that we had to do before we were officially in the military. And I drank, and they decided to make an example out of me and a few people. And they sent me undesignated. So they took away my contract. They took away my job. They took away everything. And they sent me to the fleet overseas to Japan on an aircraft carrier with no job, bottom of the fucking barrel, after I had just done all this training and made it through boot camp and everything. So I was just so defeated. I was so upset. I was so embarrassed. I didn't know how to tell my family. I made up an excuse that it was injuries, this and that, when it was my alcoholism. And I still regarded it as a phase. And we're years in of consequences now, you know, and along the way that I didn't mention, there's crashed cars, there's all this other stuff too, you know. And so I had a chip on my shoulder, and I just became a complete fucking alcoholic. 2011 through 2017, 2011 through 2014, I was in Japan. We did 4 deployments in the Asia Pacific. When I hit port and we went into these Asian countries, I mean, I ran amok. I won't get into it, but it was not good behavior with women, with drugs in the Philippines. I had tried meth for the first time in the Philippines while active duty, a couple days in a port visit, like in a hut in the Philippines, smoking crystal, because that's the drug of choice over there. And now the president, now it's like you get executed if you're caught with that stuff. You know what I mean? And like, it was wild. I just look back at some of the things I did. It was just chaos. But, you know, my luck did eventually run out. I came over to, I had met a girl when I was on leave around the 2014 time. And when I got out to San Diego after being stationed in Japan, so I got stationed here. So this is now I'm finally in San Diego, where I've been now. And I got out here. I was stationed in Coronado. I picked up shore duty. So I did a few years overseas, and then I had a few years here. And I was in Coronado, and I moved my girlfriend out with me. And you know, I figure, well, you know, a nice, beautiful, sunny San Diego. I'm closer to home, kind of near Connecticut, and you know, back in the States. This will be better. This will be a good change for me. I'm really gonna make a change, you know. Dude, I'm living 20 minutes from Mexico now. I get off at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. Like, I'm living in Ocean Beach. Things didn't go very well. You know what I mean? And it just continued to pick up from there. And then I lost my relationship, and then I eventually lost my career because I popped positive in 2017. I woke up at about 9 a.m. on someone's couch in like Spring Valley, and I had to be at work at muster in my uniform. I was active duty, and I had come off like a 2-day bender off the weekend, and I didn't show up Monday morning till 9, and our stuff starts at 6:30. Or actually, no, I didn't come into work at all that day because I knew that they were going to breathalyze me and stuff, and I would have reeked. But when I came in on that Tuesday, they said, all right, we're going to take you to Balboa Hospital, and we're going to go have you get a fit for full duty. A fit for full duty means they take your blood, they take your urine, they take your hair, they strip you down, and they look at your whole body. I mean, it is a full examination of what is going on with you. And that's when it was bam. You know, my urine test was it was a fucking rainbow, dude. I had like 5 drugs in my system. I had like meth, cocaine, benzos. I didn't even know how some of the things got in there. I'm like, I didn't do that. I guess I did. Anyway, so the gig was up, you know, and they had actually tried to help me before this point. You know, they sent me to rehab actually in early 2017, SARP, which is Substance Abuse Rehabilitation Program. And it's a military rehab in Point Loma here in San Diego. I don't know if you guys know it, but I went there, and actually this is where I first got introduced to AA. This is where I first got introduced to Alcoholics Anonymous, unwillingly, of course, but this is where I first got introduced. So I was at that residential facility for 30 days. And, you know, they bus you to meetings a couple times a week. And so I went to this one meeting, and it was in La Jolla, and it was the men's Saturday morning in La Jolla, like a 9 a.m. It was a really good meeting. And I didn't know AA, and I walked in there and I was like, wow, everybody seems like pretty like okay with life in here, you know, and like they can't all be fucking with me. You know what I mean? Like there has to be something going on, that whatever I'm doing is not it, you know? And I was down with it, you know, like I wanted to get sober. I wanted to stop drinking. I was starting to realize that, okay, my life really is like falling apart. Like this is no longer a phase. Like you're losing all this stuff because of the substances, you know? But I was so new to it that I didn't realize that you had to put 100% in. I figured I could only do some of what you suggested, or I could only read a few of the pages and it would really click. Or I could still keep my old friends. I just have to make a couple new ones. You know what I mean? Like, and unfortunately that was not enough. So when I left there, I drank, and then that's when I popped for the drugs and ultimately left the military. And then I moved out to East County. I was kicked out of the military after 7.5 years, and I had lost my career. I lost like the only thing that I knew. And yeah, I was upset because I didn't have a job in the beginning. I eventually struck a job and was a mechanic, but I liked it and it was okay. And it was a steady paycheck. I didn't love it, you know, but I was just such a liability at the end that it was like for the best that I got kicked out. But because I left because of drugs, they offered me no transition, no help when I got out. And I was just out on the street with a DD 214 and a bad discharge from the military. And it's fucking hard. It's hard to do anything about that because I had no money. I had no resources. My family was done with me. And so I was very much alone. You know, I was able to weasel some money out of my father, and get a 1-bedroom little place out in El Cajon. So I wasn't homeless, which was really good to start. And, you know, I just kept making up this bullshit that I was looking for a job, this and that. And I dove into meth. And it just spiraled from there. I started IV drug use. And it just got really, really crazy. And during this time, I met my now wife. I was so, you know, I look back on it, and the worst part of my addiction and being in the grips of it was the fact that I was just so alone. Like no one wanted anything to do with me anymore. And there's that famous quote, like the opposite of addiction is connection and all this stuff. But I really find that to be true. I did not have any love in my life. I didn't have anyone to talk to. I just ran off of my best thinking 24/7, which was fucking awful. I was doing meth. So obviously I wasn't thinking very clear, and I was just running off of self-will, and I was fucked. And I met this girl through online dating. I tried to present myself as this like guy who really had it together, and she could tell I was a fucking mess, but we had a couple good conversations, you know? And at that point I wasn't even on there on the online dating to actually go on a date. I just wanted to talk to someone. I just wanted a friend. You know, I would go to the bars and I would buy people drinks just so I could have a conversation with them so they would fucking like me. I was just so alone. You know, and I remember sitting holed up in that apartment, and, you know, I thought about how those meetings were good and all this stuff, but there's no way I can get back there. I'm too far gone, you know? And at this point I was suicidal and I was dealing with this mental health shit. And, you know, looking back on it now, like I realized that entire time that I was suicidal, I didn't want to die. I just didn't want to live that life anymore. And I didn't know how to get out of it, you know? And that's sad because I have a lot of veteran friends that are, that have committed suicide. I mean, there's at least 10 in the past couple years, that I knew personally that have died, because they get so caught up in this mental health or this addiction stuff, and they don't see a way out. And they're, you know, in the military, we're taught to become this tough unit, and then all of a sudden it ends and everybody goes to separate parts of the earth, and you just got to figure out your own life. And it's, many of us struggle. We don't see a way out. We don't have those connections like we had, and we end it. And I didn't have the balls to do that. You know, by the grace of God. So my wife is a Buddhist. She's Cambodian. Her parents escaped the Khmer Rouge in the 70s, when the communists were taking over and Pol Pot was executing all the Cambodian people. and her parents are like spiritual healers. And she talked to them and she said, "Hey, I met this guy. He's pretty fucked up, but I think we should help him." And her parents went through this whole thing where they do this ceremony and stuff. And they said, okay. And they hadn't even met me yet. And they said, okay, we're going to help this guy. So she came over one day and we had just built up a friendship. And she said, "Hey, I want to, I get emotional talking about this, but she offered me a place to stay at her house because she knew I was dying. And it saved my life because it was the only person that I had left. There was only one person left, and that was her. And she gave me a shot. And it's risky to move someone very sick into your home like that, because they're either going to get help or they're going to steal all your shit or hurt your family. You know what I mean? Like it could go, only a couple ways. And she said, "Make me a promise that there's no using." And I said, sure. I just wanted any situation that was better. And I did end up using there, and we had back and forth, and we got into a lot of fights, and I decided, okay. And I was going to sober livings at this point, and then going back to her house, and I was really trying to do the deal, but I was still not putting 100% in. And, by this time I had done a few rehabs, detoxes, and I finally went back in 2019. I went to the Anaheim Lighthouse. And something clicked. I had this, actually, Carly, you'll get a kick out of this. I was at this meditation yoga session. I was there only a few days. And I was at this meditation and yoga session, and it was with all the new guys. And, people are like coming off of heroin and all these hard drugs and just like sweating and disgusting out there in the sunlight. and I had this like moment of clarity. She was coming around with this like scented oil thing, and everybody was like, "Wow, it smells so good." Everybody talks about it at the facility, like, "Oh, it's so nice when she comes around. It smells so good." It was like a positive part of the day. You know what I mean? And so I was like, okay. And I was like sitting there laying back, and I was like, man, I can't wait for her to come around to me. It's like this nice scent that ends the session, whether it's like lavender or something. I don't know. Anyway, I'm like, why haven't I smelled it yet? Where is she? What's going on? And all of a sudden, like, it was kind of cloudy out, and like the clouds separated and the sun like hit my face like hard, and I was like hot as hell. And I was like, oh my God, this is really hot. And then all of a sudden it came by my face, and I had this like beautiful scent. And I don't know what it was. Like, people talk about spiritual experiences and these things. And like, for me, that was like only eligible. You have to be like a monk sitting upon a mountaintop, or like, I'm not eligible for some sort of spiritual experience or anything like that. But really, I didn't realize that a spiritual experience could just kind of be a moment of clarity, and it really hit me that like, okay, if you just be patient and wait for this thing and wait for, the benefits of this thing, but do all the work, it will come. But you have to stick it out. You have to wait. You have to chill out. It's not going to be instant. It's going to take a while. And it just hit me. And I said, you know what? I'm finding a sponsor today. And I found a sponsor. He's still my sponsor today. That was March. Like, I went into rehab March 6th of 2019. I still have the same sponsor. And I actually, when I got out of rehab, I did go to, I did a step down because I knew full well that I can't go back to the same environment. I need some accountability. I need some structure. That's why I mentioned the structure. I knew in the beginning that always was something that worked well for me. So I did a sober living. I did an intensive outpatient through Kaiser. And I did this kind of step down back into normal life. And I was successful for about 19 months. And my wife and I were both working from home. I ended up getting a job working for a big insurance company. I was doing sales and stuff like that. I like talking to people, and it was going well. I was making good money. But we were working from home, and my wife had a can of Duster out on the key, like by the keyboard. And I always knew full well that that's not going to show up on a drug test. It's not going to smell. But every time I would pass that can, I'd be like, oh, I'm above that. That's the old me. That's the old me. And by now we're in the pandemic. I'm not going to my AA meetings. My big book was collecting a little bit of dust. And one day I woke up and I hit that thing. And a couple, later that afternoon, I was almost right back to where I started. I was calling out of work. I was lying to my wife. I was stealing the duster because I didn't want to pay for it, even though I had the money. And so I was almost within a 24-hour period, right back to where I was 19 months prior. So I got a hold of myself. I had talked to my sponsor. I was so messed up that I talked, well, it wasn't alcohol or drugs. So is there any way I can keep my sober time? He's like, are you fucking kidding me? Absolutely not. He's like, you willingly went out and got high. I said, okay, fair enough. So I had to reset my clock September 17th of 2020. So a little over 2 years now. In that time, I have become very consistent with my program. I actually just started the steps over today. I'm working the steps again. I do a 12-step program. AA was the first thing that worked for me. And my life is pretty good. Like, I won't get into it all, but like, I just had a baby. I got married. I was able to buy a home, and things are pretty good now. I left the insurance industry and I started working in treatment, actually, which is where I met Carly. And I love it. I'm a case manager there and a counselor. And I actually I just graduated with my bachelor's in psychology, and I start my doctorate program at Alliant University for the PsyD program this fall. Wow. So, it can be done. It's just so much fucking work, man. Like, it's just so much work, just getting through all the court and stuff like that. Cause when I got out, I got a couple DUIs, which I didn't mention, but just getting through the legal stuff and just the one day at a time phrase, man, I still struggle with that stuff, but it really is true. Taking that next indicated step and just trying to slowly make a little progress. Cause the key for me to find happiness in my life again was progress. Like, when I saw myself getting a little bit better each day, it made me want to continue doing what I was doing, and I really think that the key to happiness is progress. And that's kind of where I'm at. So.
Well, thank you for sharing your story, Matt. I learned some more about you today.
There's a lot. I know there's a lot in there.
There's a lot. And I feel like there's so much that we could unpack and be here for hours just in that little 20-minute story, of recovery and all of that. But I was trying to take notes a little bit to remember a couple things that I just really wanted to highlight, I guess, for our listeners and whoever. But in the very beginning, you talked about not coming from a background of trauma or a lack of privilege or whatever. Right. And I think a lot of people associate addiction and alcoholism and substance use disorder with coming from some kind of fucked up history, basically. But that's not always the case. And there's there's no prerequisite of having a sucky life to end up with some of these issues. It doesn't, I don't think anybody necessarily really knows, why it happens.
I agree.
It just does. And you talked about having to put 100% into your recovery. No half measures, as they say in 12-step.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Learn the hard way. Yeah.
What does putting 100% into your recovery look like today? Or just in general, I guess.
So mostly I would say owning up to my bullshit when it happens, or making amends right away, or owning it. And not acting out on emotion, which is really hard for me. And always, and staying active in the program when I even don't want to go, but really it's for so many years, I acquired these tools as I went along and I didn't use them, but now I really use them because I still struggle, and I reach out to people, I work with others, and, I stepped into a role to do this for a living. You know what I mean? So recovery is my whole kind of life right now. I still have my self-care and stuff I do on the side, but it's it's everything to me, including the Instagram and stuff like that, and helping other people, but mainly knowing that AA has my back, and that is my network, and those are my people. And not staying within the herd 100%. So
Totally.
yeah.
And I'll just add that I love that your moment of clarity was during yoga and meditation.
I knew you'd like that.
And I like to think that some of the guys that I teach yoga at the treatment center he works at on Thursday nights. And I've been doing that for like 2 years now. I like to think that some of them have their spiritual awakenings in our sessions.
Some of them do. Some of them, just like in my treatment, some of them enjoy to lay down for a bit.
Right.
Enjoy to have an experience. Yeah.
It's all good either way.
Yep,
but I'll let you jump in, Brian.
Cool. Thanks, Carly. Yeah, Matt, it's interesting you talk about one of the core parts of your recovery is really emotional regulation and working with your emotions. Appreciated you getting vulnerable and sharing some of the really moving aspects of your recovery, especially when it comes to, being with people and having someone take a chance on you. And I noticed as I was looking through the Instagram that you run, I mean, there's so many poignant, moving stories. I was getting really emotional and going through that before this interview. So I'm wondering if you could kind of tell our audience what is a life recovered and maybe the history of it.
Yeah. So So the pandemic was kind of getting in full swing early 2020, March or April. And I saw a lot of people relapsing. I saw people dealing with domestic violence. Just a lot of bad shit was skyrocketing. And especially in our recovery world, a lot of people were relapsing. That was mainly what was really frustrating to me. And one of my friends, his sister was murdered by her husband, and just bad shit was happening. I was kind of bored at home, and I was like, man, started posting these videos on my personal Instagram, and my brother reached out to me. It was like, dude, no one wants to hear your sober shit all the time. You should just start on another page that's sober related if you want to talk about that stuff. And I was like, well, that's not a bad idea. Well, what do I do? I'm not tech savvy at all, but I was like, okay, maybe I could start something where people could share their individual stories. And I had this interview, I'm going to go interview people all over San Diego. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. So what I did was I came up with a name. I started this page. It's called A Life Recovered. And basically it is a page where people, I mean, it's gone a ton of different ways, but basically now people submit their stories to me. I give them an outline of kind of what we're looking for, how it was, a little bit of your experience, maybe childhood, what was the turning point, where are you at now, and how did you get there? So we kind of leave out all the war stories because we can all relate to that. But basically, I want to know, where were you at, what happened, and how are you successful through that now? And the hopes of doing that, and it's not just addiction, it's mental health, everything to deal with the human condition, right? And the hopes of doing that is that it shows other people that they are not alone. Because many people don't work 12 steps. They don't do smart recovery. They don't do celebrate recovery. They don't read. They don't do anything. They go on Instagram. So, and that's okay. And if that's what you want to do, because then there's pages like mine and many others where you can maybe get a spark of, hey, maybe it's time to try something different. Here's a story how this person was successful. They also dealt with what you dealt with. So maybe you can talk to them, because that's my biggest thing. I've built that account completely organically. I've never paid for a follower. I've never paid for a like. I built it completely organically so people can relate to each other and have meaningful conversations on there and connect in hopes that they better themselves. And it's just kind of taken on a life of its own, and I do submit, and I started it, in July 31st, 2020 was my first post. And I went to Ocean Beach and I did this little video out kind of near the ocean where this is what I'm doing. This is who I am. This is what I want to do. And it was hard at first too, because I had 40 followers and people were like, dude, who the fuck is this guy asking for my personal story? I don't know this guy. So what I had to do was I had to actually ask close friends and people that knew me to help me get it off the ground. Mm-hmm. And that's how I was able to start building stories. So all the first stories are everybody that I know from my personal life. And then it evolved into people being like, okay, well, they did it, so I'll do it, and it just kind of went from there. And I was doing like memes and stuff in the beginning, and it was fun to make them, but it was like, okay, I don't know if people are getting any value out of memes right now. So let me switch it up, and let's really, that's when I dove in and I started doing before and after photos and illustrating the transition, you know what I mean? And I have stories that are all very unique on there. Some of them are very intense, very, very intense. I have stories on there of, women that were raped. I have stories on there of people that have murdered parents or murdered children. I have stories on there of a guy that actually drove. He's a good friend of mine now, and he was under the influence, and he got in a car accident, and he killed two people that were sober and in recovery.
Wow.
His name is Martin Lockett. He's out of Washington. He's a really good guy. But so I have these really like wild stories on there, and people see these and they just are like, wow, like some of this has happened to me, and that's work for that person. Maybe I can do that. Or, hey, that's really bad. I don't want that to happen to me. So maybe I should make a change. You know what I mean? And I think it's working, and it is part of my program. I mean, it's a little bit of way to me to be of service. I don't make a dime off of it. I don't do advertisements. I don't tell you to buy shit. I just post on there in hopes that it can resonate with you. So.
Well, it's super well done and very inspirational. And I want to say that I probably started following that account like before you had 68,000 followers there or whatever, because it was a couple years ago.
Yeah.
So crazy to see how like it's evolved, and it's probably one of my favorite recovery accounts that I follow for sure, because of how real it is. And like, there's no sugarcoating.
No, there's not. And that's actually a downside too, because I get banned, or I violate community guidelines all the time. So I have to like really be careful with what I do. They'll block me on the, I know. Once I get enough money one day, I'm going to buy Instagram and I'm going to let anyone post whatever they want. But it's a double-edged sword, because, sometimes they just remove my stuff that I work hard to put out because it mentions a drug, or it's strict on there. But I do be as real as possible. You know what I mean? I'm not going to change and tailor it, because I have a mission, and that's it. It is what it is. So
amazing.
Yeah.
Well, as we kind of wrap up, we wanted to leave people with some insights and, just little nuggets for them to take away after they've spent however long listening to us talk here. But what's an important insight that stuck with you during your healing journey?
So the best thing that stuck with me was a conversation that I had with a counselor when I went to treatment and started to take it seriously. And he said, hey, you have to get to a point where you realize that you don't know what's best for you anymore. And you have to put your faith in another human being that has walked this path. Because like I mentioned, I was always running off self-will. And I needed someone else to show me the way how to live a better life, because I didn't know how to do it. And I had to be vulnerable to that person, and I had to open up. And it doesn't just mean step work, but I had to trust that they could possibly guide me in a right direction, and I can listen to them and I can get better, So getting a mentor or a sponsor or someone in your life that you can open up to is very key, and open up to on all levels is very important for you to make progress. So I think that would be the most important thing is get to a point where you can communicate to someone, doesn't have to be everyone, but to someone about what's going on. I think that's my best insight. That's what helped me the most, was be like, okay, I can't do this on my own, whether it's mental health, addiction, anything. I can't do this on my own. I need to open up to someone.
Totally.
Thank you for that, Matt. So beautiful. As a kind of final takeaway to your insight for our audience is to find someone you can talk to. And I'd like to invite people who've made it this far. First of all, so much gratitude to you, Matt, for your vulnerability. Maybe folks who are watching this, who are just encountering Recovery Corner and young people in recovery for the first time. We'd love to have you join us in some of our meetings, our all recovery meetings, where you can have honest and frank conversations about mental health and recovery. We, of course, invite all of you to check out A Life Recovered and the works Matt's doing. What do you think, Carly and Matt? Any final takeaways before we say goodbye?
No, I think that's it. I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, super appreciate you, Matt, for taking the time to join us. And yeah, we have people at YPR who want to connect with everybody, whether they're in recovery or know people in recovery, or know people who are struggling or want to be in recovery, etc. We have resources, and yeah, that's about all I have to say. It's been awesome.
Awesome. We'll see you next time, everyone.
All right. Take care.